Is the city a paid position?
It is, but it's more volunteer when you consider. So council members make roughly $17,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
So
pretty much
when you calculate that, you're averaging anywhere from 15, sometimes 40 hours a week, it's like, in fact, I've told people you cannot go into this if you have any concept or desire for money, at least not if you're going to be honest about it, because I have lost probably 6+ figures just in the last year at my personal business because so much of my time gets shifted away that I'm not building that like I normally would be, or not physically there like I normally would be. But for me, it's not about money. When I die, when I meet my maker, he doesn't care how much money I had or how big my house was. So I just like to focus on what truly matters and spend my time more intentionally.
Yeah, I actually think we've talked about this before. I think politics should be all volunteer. I mean, you think about like our founding fathers, it was all volunteer.
Right.
I mean, they were all mega successful financially.
Right.
But I think that's what also allowed them to have the thinking and the thought process and the knowledge and the wisdom to be able to guide our country through those times.
Yeah, there's kind of a double thought process to that, because I certainly agree with that. And then there's also the side, though, that you don't want just the elites and those who are wealthy controlling everything, right? You want to be able to have someone who might be a really solid, principled person, but for whatever reason, maybe they just haven't reached that financial success. And so you want them to be able to have opportunity too. And that's really, look at this Congress race, right, that we have going on right now in our own district. These congressmen, they're making close to $200,000 a year. Plus you think of all the perks that come along with it. And I'm thinking that's probably motivating a lot of people to run for those positions, is the money, when that shouldn't be a motivator. So there's kind of this balance of what is the right answer, right? Because we don't want people driven by money, but we also don't want the elites running everything either.
Yeah, good point. What do you think? Do you think there's a solution to those? I mean, what?
Yeah, I think
you thought about it.
I have thought about it, and it's still something that it's a struggle, honestly, for me, because I do feel like it needs to be essentially volunteer. But I'm okay with there being some amount of compensation to at least allow even someone like me, right? I don't need the money. I can still feed my family without it, but at least there's that little bit of compensation that I'm away from my family a lot.
Makes you feel like it's worth your time.
It makes me feel like there's at least, even though it's not for the money and it's really pennies compared to what I could be making at my normal career, it's at least something to help feed my family. So there's that balance where I'm not against there being some compensation, but it shouldn't be so high, like Congress, for instance. Multiple 6 figures, to where that's a driving force in wanting people to choose that career path.
Well, it's always funny to me. You look at, just some of the things you see, like Nancy Pelosi, for example. She made $175,000 a year, and she's got huge net worth, $250 million
like
net worth.
Where did that net worth come from exactly off of $175,000 a year?
Yeah, so I think that there are those, you talk about perks, I think that's probably the biggest perk that I think most politicians get. I saw there's actually a Republican congressman right now. I can't remember his name, but he currently just bought a huge short position on the American economy on the S&P 500, which is crazy to me to think that a congressman could bet against the United States economy.
Interesting.
And not go to jail.
And profit from it.
Yeah.
Not just not go to
Insider
jail, but make millions of dollars because the American economy tanks. So, yeah, I think that, it's a crazy thought process to think about.
Yeah, it's like we need the term limits, right? And you would hope there would be enough compensation to where somebody wouldn't mind doing it, but then also, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Almost, it's time for somebody else to take over and do that. And
yes, I'm a huge fan of term limits. I think that would solve a lot of the issues.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Your story's interesting. I think maybe we should get into that. How did you end up running and into politics? How did that happen for you? Because I think, I just watched it on social media, but I've never had a chance to have that conversation. So how did you end up doing that? What was your driving factor?
Great question, because I literally never had a desire to jump into the political realm. Yeah. I will say throughout my life, and even as a teenager, I was always very liberty-minded. Mm-hmm. I started reading books, for instance, by Glenn Beck when I was a teenager, and he was one of my people I looked to as far as...
Did you have a crush on him like my wife did?
I wouldn't go as far as a crush, but I will say, 19 years old, I flew by myself for the day to Washington, D.C., just for the day to be there for his 828 Restoring Honor Rally is what it was. And I just felt that passion of how important it is that we protect our communities, our God-given freedoms that don't come from government, they come from God, and how vital it is that we realize that and protect that. So I have always been passionate, but I've never had that desire to put my name out there or be in the forefront. So what drove me to that is, first and foremost, being a wife and mother. Once you become a parent, and I think both of you are parents, your world changes. Yeah. All of a sudden, when you are now responsible for another human being in this planet that you brought into this world, I would do anything to make sure that this world is a world that I would want my children to inherit. So when 2020 hit, I had a really big wake-up call. I think we all get busy in our day-to-day lives. I think a lot of times we focus on how terrible the federal government is, and it becomes overwhelming, like, oh, what can I possibly do about that? That's FUBAR, right?
Yeah.
But realizing when all of those mandates were coming out, how quickly those freedoms can be taken, how quickly people will allow that to happen.
I was surprised by how fast people would allow it to happen. Yeah.
I was shocked. I thought for sure, at least here in Utah, that there's no way we would allow these mandates on healthy elementary children with no science at all to support that. And so I really had to make a conscious decision. So as a healthcare provider, I'm a nurse practitioner. My background is actually emergency medicine. Okay. So I had worked in emergency medicine for a decade. And 2020, I was pregnant with my youngest child. I was working in the emergency department, running my business, and here this hits, right? This virus hits. And I was very cautious being a frontline healthcare provider. I wanted to do everything I could to protect my baby, protect my family. Really quickly, however, it was very apparent. I'm not good at a lot of things, but I am good at sniffing out BS really quickly. I know when I'm being lied to. And really quickly, I started seeing the censorship of science. The propaganda, the flat out lies that were being perpetuated. And I thought, how are we standing for
That's
this?
Just it. When it first came out, it's like we were all kind of going, okay, what is this? But after like a month or two, it's like, okay, let's start looking at this.
For me, it was after getting it. Like at the beginning, I remember when it happened, we were actually doing a meeting. We had a big meeting, 1,000 people showing up, and it was just starting to like happen in the news. And I remember telling Kelsey, like, babe, we're not going to be able to do a meeting next week. And she was like, what? And I'm like, no, seriously, like they're shutting things down. We're not going to be able to do a meeting next week. And like, to put this into perspective, I didn't cancel a meeting for Christmas. Like for me, it was always like, you do a meeting, we're doing a meeting. It was pre-planned. I don't care what happens. And then, we didn't do a meeting. And then, so I was a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen? And then after I got it, I'm like, oh, this is what everybody's freaking out about?
Yeah, it wasn't so bad. I couldn't taste or smell. That part was real.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's how I found out I knew that I had it. I went go drink coffee, and it just tastes like hot water.
Right. So and that's what I tell people. It's a real man-made virus with a fabricated response.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Good point, yeah.
So I made a really conscious decision, July 2020, that I was going to start speaking out publicly about, from the medical perspective, right? Because I had been doing so much research, being in the position I was in.
And you're seeing it firsthand.
I'm seeing it firsthand.
Yeah, you're 5 months in at that point, right? Well, 4 months in.
Right, yes. And kids were about to go back to school. And that mama bear came out in me of, don't you dare mandate something onto my child that A, the science does not support, B, they're actually is potential risks associated with this, which we've now seen. It's now been proven. And you're going to force that on children. So I, through that process,
was this mandate originally, sorry to cut you off, but was this mandate originally the masks, or was it?
Yes.
Because the vaccine hadn't come out yet
Correct.
until the following year. So it was really the mask.
This was the mask initially.
Okay, yeah.
Correct. And I wasn't ever anti-mask or anti-shot. I was anti-mandate.
Yeah.
I am pro-sound science,
Yeah.
not pro-fabricated science or propaganda science that we saw all throughout the last few years, essentially. So I had to make a really conscious decision at that point to speak vocally about this. And my family initially thought I was crazy to do so because, as you can imagine, as a business owner, those are kind of some of the topics you don't want to talk about because you can lose business, right? You can lose clientele, especially during that time where it was so divisive if you dared have an opinion outside of the mainstream narrative. And also working at the hospital in the emergency department, I knew there could be potential problems there. They wouldn't like that I was speaking truth, essentially.
So were you seeing at that time, the difference of what the media was reporting versus what was actually happening in the emergency room?
Yes. There were times that the media was actually reporting hospitals are overflowing and literally my hours are being cut.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough people being seen. We're sitting on our hands. And I'm not saying there weren't busy times throughout that period, but every winter is a busy season. Yeah. That's cold and flu season every single year. And I actually asked, I said, I want to see the data of our previous cold and flu seasons compared to now.